Welcome to MAC Discussions. My name is Emma, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator at 93.3 CFMU. Today, I am joined by McMaster University's Dean of Students, Sean Van Koughnett, and McMaster's Vice President, Dr. Kim Dai. We're also joined with two McMaster students. So to start, if everyone just wants to give a brief overview of their role, as well as to the students, what year you're in and what program.
Yeah, Sean Van Koughnett, AVP and Dean of Students. And I oversee most of, or many of the student-related aspects that lie outside the academic realm. So things like athletics and recreation, the Student Wellness Center, Student Accessibility Services, the Student Success Center, the Registrar's Office, Indigenous Student Services, and international student support. So again, most of those areas that lie outside the student academic experience, and also including residence life.
My name is Kim Dai. I'm the Acting Vice Provost faculty, and I oversee undergraduate curriculum across campus. So I chair the Undergraduate Council. I co-chair the Quality Assurance Council that does the ICAP reviews and self-studies for all of our programs. I also work with the McPherson Institute of Teaching and Learning and with the Office of Community Engagement that thinks a lot about experiential learning and community engaged learning.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Jeevan, and I'm a fourth-year life science student at McMaster.
Hi, everybody. My name is Reza, and I'm a fourth-year life sciences student as well.
Oh, so now I feel bad. I should have known you. Hi, life science fellows. I probably shared a class at some point. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I've seen you in one of my classes, I think, as a guest speaker, I think, 2 years ago.
Oh, that could be. Yeah. Well, congratulations, fourth year. It's an exciting time. And I know this isn't the best circumstances, but good on you.
Yeah, so I wanted to start off with maybe one of the big questions. This week, it was announced that the winter term will also be online. How did the university arrive at this decision?
Sure, maybe I can start, and Kim, if you want to jump in. So the provost organized a group of senior leaders to discuss the winter term. We also involved a public health expert in that discussion to understand what the winter might look like, what the risks are, and also we needed to look at the timing of it as well, because there's a lot of planning that goes into, of course, the academic side in particular. We need at least a few months to ensure that we can get ready for that winter term, and so we had a few meetings over the late summer and early fall before we reached the decision to essentially stay the course for the winter term, and it'll look quite similar as it does this fall term. Kim, I don't know if I missed anything there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, Sean. And we wanted to also, as Sean indicated, we wanted to be able to announce this relatively early so that instructors could make plans for winter rather. But also, given that this week was drop-ad, and there is some flexibility around that deadline, but we wanted students to be able to take into account what was happening in winter as they're making their plans for both fall and winter. We didn't want to have you committing to things without knowing exactly what was going to be happening in winter.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, this is a big change. So to the students, how do you guys feel about having winter term online, and how have you kind of been handling starting fall term?
Yeah, how we feel. I think I don't want to speak for Kim, but we'd all love for things to be back to normal, to have campus life back to normal, to be in person. That's one of the things it's great about all campuses, but especially McMaster, the community we have, is to be in person. So it's something we all want. So it is disappointing that where we're at, and if you look across the province, a lot of the announcements that have come out are very similar. You might have some universities that are teaching maybe a certain percentage more in person than others, but by and large, it's the same. It's a lot of the aspects, at least on the academic side, are not identical, but very similar. And so I think we're all, I'd say, disappointment, a little bit of frustration, things that are out of all of our control, that we'd much rather have everyone back together again.
Mm-hmm. So Reza or Jeevan, how have you guys been handling online so far?
Okay. So I was taking a course in spring, like right after the pandemic. So I was kind of like familiar with the situation and what is going to happen. But there was there was like a slight difference between the spring and right now is the class size and the technical difficulties that are happening for lectures. And the classes have like too many like sections right now. Like I'm not saying that like there's a problem to the classes, but it requires a lot of effort, and I see that McMaster is committed to providing that for students. I'm just a bit like kind of concerned about what is going to happen for winter classes that include labs, because I know some classes were pushed to winter just because they had labs and like they wanted to have students to work on site. But right now, like, are there any like plans or like are they right now planning to kind of integrate the online learning to labs?
So I can answer that, and I guess maybe there might be two pieces to your question. One is courses that have experiential lab components embedded in them, and I mean, experiential learning is something that we really do take pride in at McMaster. I think we do it really well with our hands-on labs and studios and work integrated learning, community engaged learning, and in the absence of our physical presence on campus, we're not removing those elements. We're going to keep that experiential learning, but it will be different. It will have to adapt to the remote learning environment. Different faculties are dealing with this in different ways. The engineering is investing in virtual reality and augmented reality simulations that allow students to actually work on the same equipment as they would have in their lab spaces, but doing so virtually. Chemistry has communicated that they're investing in some exciting new virtual labs to gain the same skills, but do so in a different way. The clinical programs are exploring virtual clinics, and students have the opportunity to train in these new environments. The Office of Community Engagement has looked at ways of having community-informed learning, so students don't have the opportunity to go into the community, but they have the opportunity to work with community partners in the virtual classroom. And we can say how much we're investing in these simulations, and we can say how wonderful these simulations will be online, but I completely empathize. It's not the same. It seems like a simulacra of what you really, really want to do in being in those labs and interacting with folks. But maybe on that plus side, our world is changing. Our work experiences are going to change over the next 10 years. We're not going to go back to what we looked like before the pandemic. Even once we have a vaccine in use, even once we have immunity, our world is going to be a little bit different in how we interact with one another. And that might not be completely bad. What we're learning now about virtual healthcare is still going to be useful when we think about healthcare in rural and distant communities. What we're learning now about using AR and VR in the research labs will continue to be useful so that we can imagine global collaborations where people are actually sharing equipment even when they can't afford the equipment in their own labs. The way we think about sharing art and theater has to change for the virtual environment, but students are doing that now in their classes. So I think that how we're looking at teaching and learning in this new environment will actually put McMaster students at an advantage. You're going to be learning these new and emerging skills as students so that when you get into the workplace, you're actually going to be the innovators and leaders who are able to work in these virtual environments. So I again, empathize about what you're missing in not being in person in the labs, but I also want you to embrace what you're going to be able to do that we actually didn't have before, and that will probably prepare you for the future world that you're actually going to face. That doesn't mean that we're going to move to being an online university. That is certainly not our intent, but I think there are neat ways in which we can do both in the future, where you have hands-on learning in the lab, but you're also doing things virtually that are going to inform your future careers.
Maybe just kind of piggybacking off of that lab question, I know other students I've seen have had concerns regarding lab hours in order to get into grad schools or employment programs. Do you think that programs are just going to have to adapt and be more lenient, or is there a plan in place for that?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about thesis and research placements, yes, I think the easy answer to your question is that everyone around the globe is in the same situation, and that programs are already beginning to think about what their requirements are and modifying those, whether it's professional schools or graduate schools. So I'd say that is happening. I would also emphasize that when you're in a research lab, that honestly using a pipette and running a Western blot, those are skills you can learn at any point in your career. What you're learning now as an undergraduate is really those critical thinking skills. It's reading the research that's already been published. It's understanding the field. It's recognizing the gaps. It's asking questions and designing experiments. It's analyzing data, but that doesn't have to be data that you collect today. It could be data that's honestly been sitting buried in a lab for 5 years, and no one has had time to explore it because we're always so busy collecting more and more data. So I think that you'll find that there's a lot of data out there that it will be hugely advantageous that we have students that can go now and delve into it and explore it. And then you're developing all of the skills of critical thinking and collaboration and communicating that data. And again, asking the next questions. Once you have those answers, what are you going to do next? So when we think about that research experience, the time that you spend at the lab bench is minor compared to all these other experiences that you're getting. So I would just embrace all of those other experiences in the remote environment. And the most important thing when you go, if you're applying to graduate school, isn't going to be the number of hours that you stood at that lab bench. It's going to be again, these critical thinking skills that you've gained, but it's also going to be that letter of reference. And your supervisor is absolutely going to be able to judge your skills and capacity in this new environment and provide that letter of support. So I wouldn't worry too much about counting the hours. I get the disappointment. You're at McMaster University. It's a great research institute, and you didn't expect to be in this position in your 4th year. But I would really take advantage of the fact that you can still work with a lab, you can still collaborate with great researchers, and you can still learn a lot of those skills. And again, move on to the next step in your research career.
Mm-hmm. So keeping with the idea of access, libraries are accessible to students during certain hours and grad students as well during certain hours. Is there any plan to expand these hours or make them more accessible to more students? I don't know if you guys, are you living around campus as students? Have you had access to the libraries at all?
Actually, no, I am not near campus, but I was going to ask the same thing because I did have a few books taken out, and obviously they have extended the due dates and whatnot due to the pandemic. But yeah, I was wondering, like, how would that work now? Like, let's say, because I like going to the library to study there, and I heard they open study spaces. Apparently, you have to book a time slot or something like that. But how would that work if we want to, take out more books and, just go to the library?
In terms of going to the library, yeah, you're right. You can book. There's at this point 50 seats at a time, and I guess I connected in with the university librarian. About 20 people a day have been booking so far. Obviously, as the term progresses, we expect that number will go up, and that the library will try to be as responsive as possible to meet demand. Kim, in terms of taking out books, and do you have an answer for that one?
Most of the collections are available online, and the library's invested a lot of time in actually transferring some of those resources online. You've probably actually noticed in the past that many of the books, the popular books, are already available as digital formats. My recollection is that there's no intention of allowing the taking out of books at this point. Even for researchers, that is a struggle and a barrier. So if you find that there's something that you can't access electronically or digitally, then I would inform the library, and they have been incredibly diligent and fast at getting some of those resources available. Okay,
great. So kind of maybe moving on to probably the biggest question over the summer from students is tuition. I know that was a big concern for a lot of kids because they will be staying at home, they won't be in class, but tuition rates stayed the same. So you could maybe speak to that a bit.
Sure, I can make a few comments, and Kim can jump in as well. So yeah, tuition's a question that every university, not only in Canada but really around the world who is online, receives. And university budgets are immensely complicated, but to try to simplify some of the economics of it, of course, the delivery in most cases, students would rather be in person, not having to study online. And so totally reasonable to be sitting in front of a computer and saying, the perceived value I'm receiving from this isn't what I expected or what I want. From a university perspective, the costs have actually, in many cases, increased. So just a rough approximation, just from the beginning of the pandemic, we've put, and I did a quick rough survey of the faculty, over $10 million into pandemic-related whether it's licensing, equipment, online course development, instructor support. We paying for some of our students who were abroad when the pandemic hit. We helped them pay for their expenses to get back safely. The Archway program that we're running for first-year students. There's those types of elements that have come into play, as well as the fact that for domestic students, tuition was cut 10% last year, frozen this year. Those things all come into play where, you know, we're in a situation where every university that I'm aware of in Canada, tuition has remained the same because of those factors. We're still hiring as many, if not more, and Kim may have information on this, instructors, TAs, all those types of supports as well haven't changed. The mode of delivery has changed, but none of those other things have changed on the cost side. In fact, they've gone up.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. The costs have gone up. We've hired more digital learning specialists and educational specialists to help with course development and moving to the online environment. In many courses, even though you might imagine we could cram more students into a class or tutorial, because the learning environment's different in a virtual tutorial, many courses and programs have hired more TAs to help spread out that learning. Reza, you were pointing out that in spring, maybe online learning wasn't so bad because the classes were smaller. You know, being in a Zoom or a Teams environment with 25 other students, you can develop a relationship with your instructor. You get to know them, they get to know you. Honestly, in some ways, I'm finding it easier to know people's names because they're right in front of me, whereas it took me months to be familiar with students' names in the past. So some of that relationship building is actually just a little bit easier in the online environment. And I think we're all getting more familiar and comfortable with the online environment. And then Reza, you point out that in fall, now your classes are much larger and you're feeling like you're losing that connection. I think it's a really interesting observation that you know, with MOOCs and these other online classes, we've always assumed you can just keep adding students into them. But we actually have this opportunity to think very carefully about our online environment and think about the size and think about that relationship building. So what we're doing now can inform what we're going to do in winter as well. I think that this is an interesting question that has arisen because of our online learning, but we have and should have been thinking about this question when we started building lecture halls that hold 600 students. You know, that there weren't good pedagogical reasons for doing that, but yet we kept doing it. It was sort of the drift that was occurring. So this is actually an opportunity to kind of step back and say, okay, wait a minute, what works really well both in the face-to-face and online environment, and let's invest in that and let's continue doing that well. And let's look for ways in which this can be combined. While we're in a position now where essentially everything is online, we will eventually move back to a place where things are blended, and some things might work better online, and absolutely many things will work better in person. And so we can look at the ways of combining those that are best for the student's experience.
CFMU would like to thank everyone involved in this week's MAC discussions. Make sure to follow our social media accounts at 93.3 CFMU to be notified when part 2 is available. If you would like to be a part of our next video, or you have a question you would like answered, you can contact us through any of our social media, which is once again 93.3 CFMU.